Cyber Uncut. Discover the changing face of business, government and national security as Australia navigates the cyber revolution.
G'day, how you going? Phil Tarrant, co-host of Cyber Uncut. I listened to that introduction. It scares me. Just sounds really, really important, and particularly when not necessarily an important person. And welcome to everyone tuning in. We're videoing today rather than just on the airways. This is in the studio, Momentum HQ, because my long-time co-host, Marcus Thompson, Major General retired, Doctor, is in the studio. Finally, they've allowed him on a plane. I think only just, considering what happened at Qantas today. Marcus, how you going? And Liam also joins us, Managing Editor, Defence and Aerospace. That sounds awfully important as well. Momentum Media in the studio for the first time.
I think I've been bumped down. I'm usually doing the intro, and I don't get the chance to do it today.
Does it make you nervous?
Oh, well, now it feels weird sitting in the other chair because I don't know what you're going to ask. And I think, is this what people usually feel? It's not a great feeling, Phil.
Oh, it's nice to put the shoe on the other foot. And I get asked to go on other people's podcasts sometimes, and I don't like questions. I'm very good at sort of avoiding answering them. So I normally say no. So I like to be in control, Liam, much like Qantas with its ticketing system.
Well, I don't think there's much in control there at the moment,
yes.
Phil.
Well, we have first-hand experience here. I think you tried to get on a plane this morning and the bloke after you, it didn't work.
Oh, well, so
cyber hack.
Well, I mean, I didn't think much of it at the time, but I was on my way to the gate this morning in Canberra, and someone was trying to show their boarding pass off their phone, the digital version, and scan, computer says no, and then the other passenger looked at their phone and said, "Oh, that's someone else's boarding pass."
Wow.
And I thought, how do you mess that up? And didn't think another thing of it. Got off the plane a little under an hour later, and there's all these news reports of a data breach at Qantas. And then by the time I got into the CBD, there's all these other news reports of I read a particular article that all of these bogus social media sites had popped up pretending to be Qantas, offering to help people who were affected by.
They're quick, aren't they? Responsive.
Just vultures, just straight into it. Yeah. Straight into it. You just got to be so careful. And that'll be people who are stressed because they might be a bit worried about the data breach effect. That they might be worried that they're going to miss their plane or something like that. So, here's an answer. This person might be able to help me. Hand over my details. Hand over my credentials. Hand over maybe a credit card, and the criminals got away with something again.
Yeah, here we go.
These spoofed websites, they're incredibly accurate. They look oftentimes like the exact website that Qantas would put up or the exact website that a multi-billion-dollar company would put up. And you're none the wiser. They're mining SEO as it comes up. So as you're there Googling, okay, cool, I need a help desk, I'm getting someone else's boarding pass, and it's the first thing that comes up, you are none the wiser.
Yeah. Anyway, this is the world we live in. So not a cyber hack, a software glitch which has exposed information to people that shouldn't have received the information. Privacy breach.
And from all reports, certainly, it would. I mean, absolutely, an IT glitch that reports at this stage would indicate that perhaps led to a data breach.
Okay.
Sorry, or the data loss.
Well, there we go. Sort of on-the-fly commentary around it. No doubt you can read all about it on cyberdaily.au. Is that the correct website, Liam?
Cyberdaily.au, Phil. And the team is non-stop on this. Yesterday alone, Phil, the team at Cyber Daily were the first to report on 2 breaches in Australia. Always there. They're always scrolling through the threat feeds. And we actually have a joke because we all sit in the Momentum Media offices and every 30 minutes to an hour, they're calling someone up for comment. And it's very much are you sitting down at the moment? Because we're probably going to be the first to notify you that your company's actually suffered a data breach. And every single day, David Hollingworth, our senior journo, Daniel Croft, our journalist, they're the first to call up these companies before their MSSPs call them, before they've even realised they've been hacked themselves. It's often we're the ones telling them.
Maybe we should get a finder's fee.
Maybe
it's a new way to assess it. There we go, Mark. What do you think about that?
Do you think we could backdate it?
The advisors. Mate, we're doing a service to the nation, mate. Come on.
They're by calling victim companies.
Probably. Mm-hmm. No, somebody to identify them and notify them and say, hey, look, did you know about this? But there was a hack a non-bank lender. Was it First Mac?
First Mac.
First Mac got. And I was reading about them in the paper today subsequent to you guys writing about it, and they pretty much are providing a service, whether or not Qantas will do something similar based on what you just mentioned. These spool sites, a free service to customers who may have had their information mishandled or accessed by someone that shouldn't have it, to ameliorate any further potential misuse of their information or any other information they might be getting to try and stop that. So they're now underwriting the cost of saying to their customers, hey, if you've got any problems, any questions, you speak to these people and they'll fix it for you. I guess that's probably best practice.
I mean, no doubt the Qantas team will be all over this. I mean, I mean, I've met many of the techies and cybersecurity folk who work in Qantas. It's a slick operation.
Maybe it's Bonza. Maybe Bonza behind it all. Oh gosh,
maybe a few weeks ago that would have been the case. No longer.
It could have been. But hey, so gentlemen, getting you in the studio, I like it. I think any time that you're up or we are down or wherever we're travelling, our worlds collide. We should
nice to do it in high definition film.
But it is good, isn't it? And it's just a sage reminder of. I don't know where I was going to go with that. I'll leave that one alone. Right. But important point, gentlemen, is the very important work of Cyber Daily, and we sort of, have been doing some repositioning and shaping it and sculpting it. So it's more than just. I get a bit fatigued personally talking about hacks all the time. I don't want all of our commentary to be around breaches, etc. It's what makes headlines.
Well, I think, and the other thing is, more often than not, Phil, I find myself saying a lot of the same things, over and over again, as we still find companies that aren't, organisations that aren't patching their systems in a timely way, organisations that haven't implemented multi-factor authentication on their systems, and what do you know? Then they find themselves a victim of some sort of hack or data breach, and so it's nice to every now and then find something else to talk about. And a big focus for us at Cyber Daily is to look at cyber as a mechanism for promoting and encouraging commercial transactions, commerce, the economy, everything else which is cyber as an enabler rather than a disabler. And there's only one very small aspect or component of it is the use of cyber for nefarious activities. It is changing the way in which we live, changing the way in which the world works, changing the way in which we communicate. And it's here to stay.
And it's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. It's only going to keep, the speed of growth of the utility of how we use cyber is only accelerating faster by the day.
Listen to you.
You like that?
Yeah, I do.
I've been reading about it. But while I've got you in the studio, Marcus, it's got me thinking. It's something that, I've thought a lot about, and it sits in the background quite a lot. And this is sort of with a view towards what you used to do for a living and whether or not, you let go of these skills and capabilities, but you stood up the Information Warfare Division for Australia, the ADF, circa
2017.
2017,
Mm-hmm.
7 years ago.
7 years ago.
And
In fact,
that's
it's almost to the day.
Almost to the day. Okay.
Yeah.
And so that wasn't a new thing. That's been happening in the ADF for years, right? Whether it's
mate, I mean, a lot of this stuff's been happening since biblical times.
Correct.
Right? And but it was a deliberate decision in 2016 to establish the Information Warfare Division for the Australian Defence Force that occurred in 2017. It was just recognising the nature of contemporary operations, that this was a capability that needed to be nurtured, loved, and scaled.
Yes, and it's as relevant today as what it always has been, but the way in which the conduct of information warfare continues to evolve, probably at the same speed as what we're just talking about, the utility of cyber, right? Cyber now just being one of the machinations of information warfare, but it's been happening for
it's the
hundreds, thousands, whatever of years.
Cyberspace is the domain through which a lot of the contemporary information operations are conducted. And you've heard me say many times, Phil, and poor old Liam's had to listen to this as well. There's nothing much new in this. Influence, deception, psychological operations have been around since biblical times. What's new is the conduct of these activities in and through cyberspace, and therefore the speed and scale with which they can be conducted.
So influence, deception, operations, it also happens inside a business. So a lot of the skills and capabilities and tactics and strategies employed by modern militaries and also ancient militaries around their skill set, the relevance of those skills and capabilities sits in business just as much. So when you look at cyber, the connectivity of cyber and the fact that we're now dialed into each other with the immediacy of it, the capabilities of influence operations are only going to be more augmented by how technology changes. However, every single business, whether they know it or not, are involved in psychology, or they're involved in influence operations through the conduct of business.
Did right.
That's the reality of it. And that might be an alarming truth for a lot of people, but if they sit down and think about what they do, any business is trying to shape and change an outcome. And the way in which we do it in the modern domain, in many ways, is using information content to achieve it. Myself and Liam, we work in the business of information, in the business of content. We use our content to inform people. That information helps change and shape and influence decision-making. So very, very different outcomes, but very, very similar skills, Mark. And so it's got me thinking about it. The skills of the modern business operating in a dynamic environment dialed in by a blue wire is how quickly the immediacy of information and correspondence with your stakeholders, whoever they may be a customer, may be some other sort of stakeholder, and your ability to shape decision-making is going to be the key and core effectiveness of your skills as a business moving forward. It always has been that way, but it's just now so much more enhanced. So here's the question, how can Australia's businesses and business professionals embrace some of the skills used inside of influence operations, inside of our militaries, which is your domain, to get a better outcome or get better business outcomes in their day-to-day world? And that's what I want to explore. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun, Marcus. Am I off the mark?
No, I don't think so. I've been musing about this for a little while as I've over the past 3.5 years since stepping out of uniform and getting greater exposure to industry and the commercial ins and outs of business, both from an advisory perspective, but also from a board perspective. And one of the things that is clear, and I think you're spot on, Phil, is that a lot of these techniques, information operations, influence activities, psychological operations, are as relevant in the commercial world as they are in the military for different purposes. Before people start emailing in and telling me that we're conducting military operations for business, but there's a couple of things here that so it's easy to say that, but there's a couple of things here that are really important to recognise. Is that good influence operations, and I'm gonna sort of talk about the military, but then map it to commercial, and you can help me with that, Phil and Liam. Is that it's through all domains, right? It's not just through cyberspace. It is fundamentally nested into the macro plan or the strategy. So we're not talking about sprinkling a bit of information dust over a developed plan at the end. It's the whole thing is nested, the whole thing is integrated for a particular outcome. Remembering that great Clausewitz quote that war is a contest of wills. In the military, it's about bringing the enemy to your will. Now that might be, which might be to stop fighting, it might be to retreat, it might be to go left, instead of right, because we've conducted a feint to distract them so that we can bring our advantage to their disadvantage. However that is, but it's got to be a fundamental part of the plan, which I think. And some of these things are real specialist skills, and I met plenty of people in the military, and I've met plenty of people since I left the military who think that they I'm a good smart generalist, I know all about strategic communications. You might, but not as well as a specialist in this field. And I saw what specialists could do in the military. I've seen what specialists can do in the commercial world. And I think so. First point, it's got to be nested as part of the plan, but you bring those specialist skills to the fore, because ultimately, as you said, it's about influencing the behaviour of a key decision maker. From the military perspective, it might be influencing the behaviour of an enemy commander or an adversary commander. In commercial land, of course, it might be about influencing someone to buy or to engage your services or buy your product. Whatever it is. I mean, this is what advertisers do, right? Mm. They throw something out there that generates an emotional or irrational response. That generates a commercial advantage, which of course all of that can be measured. Mm. All of that can be measured. I mean, I'm talking to a couple of media people here, but you can measure the click-through rate. You can measure how many people actually watch the video all the way to the end. For example. And they're the sorts of techniques that enabled us to measure the effectiveness of some of our information operations, in operational theatres, and they're the same techniques that some of the advertising
the crossover is key. And if you think back to conflicts like World War I and World War II, when it was a whole of nation exercise, when your traditional propaganda aspects of the military were looking for people to put in uniform, they normally, and a lot of them went to the advertising sector and the journalism sector to find people with those skills to support with not only the creativity of thinking up these operations, but the tactical capabilities to deliver them. The skill set is highly aligned, but to your point, the outcome or the effects of those outcomes are highly different. So do good information warfare people, can they find good homes now in advertising, Marcus, or strategic comms?
I think so.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm absolutely certain of it. And g'day to all my former team who are listening. But this is the thing. It's a specialist skill, and for all of our listeners, Phil, who think, no, that's right. No, I know boats. I'm good with stratcoms. I can amplify something through social media. Just go and have a coffee with a professional with a strategic comms professional, and just understand the difference and the capability that they bring. Because holy crap, when they get it when they get it right, it is just amazing.
So a lot of the academic disciplines, and I know you're both very comfortable talking academically because you have more degrees than most. Most of the academic attention put towards influence operations is usually directed to countering influence operations or influence operations at a government and or a military level. It's not common lexicon yet for people to be talking about, I believe, influence operations inside of business. And maybe the very notion of the term influence operation assumes some sort of negative connotation. It's quite a loaded term, an influence operation. It usually means manipulation, right? That's how it's framed. Yeah. That's not the case. I don't know if you have a view on that, Liam.
In both advertising and Stratcom and with influence operations, you're looking for a cognitive or psychological effect, whether you're selling to consumers or whether you're trying to achieve a battlefield effect. So a good example is during the Hakbalahat rebellion in the Philippines, the communist insurgency in the 1940s and 1950s. The CIA used a very interesting tactic because a lot of those who fought in the rebellion were from the hills of the Philippines, and they had this mythical vampire called the Aswang. And so what the CIA and the Marines did, or the counterinsurgent fighters did, was they would use symbology of this vampire everywhere. And bit by bit by bit, the insurgents would get very frightened because they're going out in the hills. They're conducting these operations far from home where they believed these vampires lived. And bit by bit, they whittled it down, and people did not want to fight anymore, which is going right back to that Sun Tzu quote that the real apotheosis, I think is the best way to put it, of skill isn't beating your enemy in battle. It's making your enemy not want to go to battle with you at all. So
that's hundreds and hundreds of years ago.
That's and that's the unchanging nature of what we're discussing here. So they also did this with a few psychological levers, which is whenever they discovered communist caches, they would not actually necessarily ambush them. They would leave notes saying that you've been discovered. And this constant psychological shaving down of the enemy made them not want to fight them anymore. The interesting thing is, obviously, at its core, we're talking about myth, we're talking about narrative. And this is one thing that's often discussed in advertising, often discussed in Stratcom, which is national attitudes, national perceptions. The perceptions of individuals are a sum of hundreds of years of myth and narrative. In this example, it was the Aswang, the vampire that made people not want to fight. Let's look at it. What about lamb ads on Australia Day? You're touching the myth. Yeah, you're touching the narrative. You're touching the myth. People watch it and it strikes them to their core. Oh, got to go buy my lamb for Australia Day.
So Sam Kekovich is the heads up and influence operations to shape people.
Or maybe the person who wrote the script.
But he's the face of it, right?
Correct,
and he's now part of the mythology.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and right? without knowing, you're touching on the same effector here, which is the use, I can't say weaponization in advertising, but the use of myth and narrative to speak to your target audience, whether you're looking for a battlefield effect or whether you're looking for a consumer effect.
So when did you're signals guy, right?
Yeah,
is your craft, and then sort of special ops stuff and all that sort of thing, right? Yeah. When did you go, hang on a second, this is a really interesting aspect of, the point being and the quote that you're better off not fighting. You're better off, persuading or influencing your adversary not to fight. When did you go, that's actually a really interesting world to sort of get into?
I mean, it was probably the first time I deployed to an operational theatre into a combat zone, because a lot of these techniques are inherently difficult to incorporate into big training exercises.
Yep.
It's just hard, right? Not impossible. There's ways to do it, and
so it's a lot more of a pragmatic application, that sort of stuff.
That's right. But then when you're actually in the operational theatre, a lot of these ideas become self-evident. That hey, it'd be good if we can actually, because we're trying to achieve this. Wouldn't it be good if we can do it without being in a fight to achieve it? Now sometimes the fight is also part of the influence operation, right? So I mean, I when I was the head of information warfare, I mean, I would say frequently that it's not just about an online influence campaign. I mean, you can influence an enemy soldier by putting a bayonet in their chest, right? I mean, that's a crude close combat analogy, but that's a reality of war. Okay. But by the same token, you can influence an enemy by having national leaders, speaking in a certain way and delivering key messages. I mean, you think of Churchill in World War II. Watch what Zelensky is doing in Ukraine today. I mean, there is the president of Ukraine, a national leader who's come out of a career. Came to politics from a career in the media, so he fundamentally understands what we're talking about today, and you can see just how effective he has been, not only in influencing his sending messages to Putin and to the Russian forces. He's sending messages to the United Nations and other international partners or even opposition, and the message he's sending to his own population is just incredibly effective.
And it's a really important point, because what it raises to me, and what I'm trying to do is capture the context of influence operations and the sort of collective aggregate of information warfare, and the interpretation application of that inside of business. And that's what we're talking about right now. But what you're talking about there speaks to me of the half-life of influence operations. And if you go back 12 months ago and beyond, Zelensky captured the hearts and minds of the world through very effective use of communication and correspondence to solidify the Ukrainian people, to fight an adversary which is much larger than them, and to also influence the decision-making of largely Western nations for them to give them stuff, right? And that's what he needed. it's a very, very different game for them now. What worked for them 12 months ago ain't working for them today, and they've burned through a lot of what was available to them in order to affect an effective influence operation. So they've got to dig a lot deeper. So the question I have for you, and you said core influence operations or the tactical execution of that normally appeared as a result of the operation environment that you were working in and in a combat zone. Therefore, you need a level of pragmatism. Therefore, you need creativity. So intrinsically and structurally, your modern militaries try to not allow to have too much creativity because of the doctrinal development and the training to do things in a particular way. So how do you do both effectively? Because Zelensky's probably having the same problem right now. He needs new people with new ideas to try and affect a different outcome.
No, that's right. I mean, it's creativity and innovation is essential, but not always nurtured. Within just because of the nature of military organisations. I mean, that said, the best tacticians I ever met were incredibly creative and were probably a little.
Probably had a charge sheet, I would imagine.
They were probably non-conformist.
There you go.
And this is said by me. And I'm the first to admit that I was hardly a conformist. I've joked with friends that I probably made it as far as I did because I was a non-conformist, but I probably went a lot further than a lot of people thought I should because I was a non-conformist, that's just how it goes. But to your point, it's using your imagination, and can we imagine our way to to generate that influence? And I think you're right. I think
that's the first time you've ever said that.
Okay,
you think that I'm right.
Well,
you didn't say you are right. Maybe you're conducting some of your own influence operation.
I'm still thinking, Phil. The fact that, the assertion that Zelensky's messages aren't cutting through internationally as well as they were, maybe people got a bit tired with it. They've it's been the same message for a bit too long, and
there's something else happening somewhere else.
They're distracted. The people around President Zelensky and of course himself need to be thinking about other ways to get about it.
So to the point then about influence operations and the need of creativity, but within certain parameters, which are the rules of engagement, which the way in which Australian Western militaries operate in the rules of engagement are very different to other people. I'm sure the same thing applies to influence operations.
Rule of law, rules of engagement is what separates professional militaries from barbarians.
So let's apply that to a business sense. You need parameters from within. You need your people to operate to prosecute an outcome, a commercial outcome, whatever it is, a stakeholder outcome. So how do you do that, but also champion creativity without stifling the outcome, right? It's exactly the same challenge. And the best businesses I know who are able to appreciate and understand the discipline of influence as a commercial unique selling point or commercial point of difference are able to champion creativity but stay within the confines of the rules of engagement. Now, maybe the rules of engagement might be advertising codes of conduct. Yep. Potentially. It might be, there's a whole bunch of stuff around corporate espionage and stuff.
All sorts of domestic laws.
All the domestic laws. Yeah. So it's the same operational.
And then there'll be, again, a bit like military, there'll be a moral and ethical baseline here that, perhaps you don't lie into the market. Somebody that could come back and bite you on the bum, as a senior exec having a nasty question asked in the boardroom. Yeah. What are you doing telling untruths into the market?
When do you think, open question, when do you think this concept of influence operations will exist inside of boardrooms? When will there be a ball paper that says, here's all the div, P&L, this is our corporate governance report, whatever. When is going to be current influence operations?
Oh, well, it might,
Or they're just, it's happening, they're just called something different.
I mean, whether it's something like that or it's part of an organisation's strategy, because back to my earlier point, Phil, is that these activities, are at their very best when they are fully integrated with all other activities at the.
So you can't run an influence operation in isolation.
Well,
it won't
no,
be.
Well, in my experience and view, you can, but it'll never be as effective as when it's fully integrated with all other, with all other effects that the organisation is conducting. With as you converge on, as you drive towards the that goal, that mission, that aim, that objective, that milestone, so that everyone's pulling together in the same direction. But stratcoms, influence operations, is a key part of that.
Mm. And its role in modern warfare is relevant today as it always has been, or more relevant?
Well, I think more so, and but I think the other, perhaps what's more relevant today than what it was in the pre-internet era is the ability to be defending in that space and to recognise when you are being influenced, when you are being shaped, through some of these activities and this medium in particular. That's what you always had to be aware, if be alert to the fact that you might be being shaped. The Western militaries are not the only, or the Allies are not the only folk who think about military deception, for example. The
interesting point to that is you would argue, or you could argue, and your view, Liam, is that inside of business, influence operations are probably largely overt, whereas influence operations inside of militaries, there's probably a good balance between sort of covert and overt. Like, if you're conducting an operation to influence people inside of business, most of the time it's to sell something, unless, more sort of covert stuff would be influence operations. Let's call them what they are, lobbyists, right?
The government, it's the government relations side of things. So if you are a business and you're looking to achieve a policy outcome to ensure that your business can benefit from it, that's not something that you're going to be overt about. That is something that you can only profit off if you achieve your policy outcome without alerting the market to it first that you're looking to achieve it. And in that, there's free rider examples that you need to be the business to first capitalise on a policy and all of that, underpacking it. I think it translates across very reasonably. It's an engagement budget. It's an advertising budget. To Marcus's point, this is in concert with a whole of company response. To tie that into influence operations, look at what China's doing in the South Pacific, where you have companies able to speak on behalf of the Chinese government, Chinese companies able to speak on behalf of Chinese agencies. The whole government is working in tandem to achieve a unified objective. Bringing that into a business example is, your government engagement team, your comms team, your advertising team, your media and investor relations team, all working to achieve a singular objective. I think they're the same. I think it's the exact same.
Dead right.
You got dead right.
And
I think you.
Well, I'm really glad Liam's here.
Yeah.
The key there is making sure that everything you can do to achieve that objective and to converge onto that onto that end state is being applied, and you're not coming, with half an effort. I was about to say half-assed, but I thought the guys left to edit that out. That you're actually you're using, let specialists be specialists, and sure, as a smart generalist, you might know a bit about stratcoms, but don't, if you can afford to invest in it, then get after that, because it'll make a difference.
So can you, and I always think, I have no military experience, so I'm only an armchair observer in what I read, but I think about business and people being coachable and trainable, which is the backbone of the military, right? You spend all day preparing, right? It's part of what you do. So inside of business, how do you coach and train people to be exceptional at this type of stuff? And you talk about there is relevance for the generalists to have an understanding of appreciation, but you need specialists to prosecute. So if you think back, like, what would those skills, like, how would you quantify those skills inside of an influence operations capability within a military? Would it be someone who is really good at what?
So this is for the specialist, or
for the specialist?
Leader? Okay.
For the specialist.
Yeah. Well, for the leader, I mean, it's that creativity, it's that innovation, it's that imagination, the ability to create and disseminate a message, an effect that generates an effect. That is completely nested with across all activities of the organisation. So that whatever is being put out in terms of narrative totally aligns with the visible actions
up and out into the wider strategy.
Absolutely. So we typically find that a lot of this stuff happens at the higher levels. Is designed at the higher levels, but then there'll be execution at the strategic level, there'll be execution at the operational level, there'll be execution at the tactical level. But a lot of these things are specifically designed and indeed controlled and monitored from the highest level. It's like so many things with effects, and I know you know this from the other podcast, the Defence Connect podcast, is that the example I like to use is that of fires. You think about fast jets, missiles, artillery, mortars. The last thing, and whatever other, 3 years out of date here, Liam. Whatever else folk are using now, armed drones and whatnot. All that needs to be coordinated. The last thing any military organisation wants is uncoordinated fires. So from an information operations, from an influence activity, the last thing anyone wants is something that undermines the key narrative, and that's really important.
Having come from an advertising background, as you know, I was an ad director before I was at Cyber Daily, and you said a few words which I'm thinking, I'm like, this is exactly the same as the creative teams that I used to run. The exact same imagination. So we always used to have the old adage, which is creative solutions to complex problems. Your client would come with a client brief, some really challenging client brief. We're trying to do this. We're trying to sell X, or we're trying to influence Y to achieve an outcome. And you're there. You've got your teams that you need to rely on. You've got to rely on your copywriter to come up with a good hook. You've got to rely on your graphic designer. You've got to rely on your web builder. You come with a unified brand to achieve that objective. And all of it, when you're branding for an advertising campaign, they all have to be singing from the same hymn sheet. I think it does lines very closely.
But you talk about specialists, like you need a really good copywriter, you need a good probably graphic designer, whatever the influence operation that you're running. So the question is, what sort of specialists would you have in the military? Same sort of people who can put good info together, then people who then can use, as a cyber podcast, use the mechanism of getting it out there. So, cyber is good, but you've got to give it input, right? Who are the input people?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's specialisations that are developed internal to the military. And there's plenty of people in the part-time ADF. We used to call them reservists. That's not a thing anymore. The part-time ADF who might be advertising executives in their day job, might be marketers, might be journos. People who know how to craft a message and get it out there. These are very capable people.
So on the flip side of influence operation is countering influence operations. So let's go back to the point of I'm in business. Mm-hmm. How do you work out where you might be either currently being impacted by an influence operation, or you may be the target of that influence operation? You wouldn't know. What would be the telltale?
Or your target market is being influenced by someone or something, or something else.
We always found it's when a brand pops up on an ad feed that you've never heard of before. The good thing is now, since the 2016 election, you can view the ad library and you can see how much they're spending.
You're talking political advertising now?
Yes. Yeah. Which would... Facebook's advertising policy, if we're going specific, is so broad that it is very hard to not fall into it unless it's so consumer. You'll probably fall under the
Who'd have thunk that, Liam?
Oh, I know. I will. So you can view it on the ad library and you can estimate how much they're funding. So if there is a brand out there that you've never heard of, they've got a very short window from which they've been advertising. They've been operational for several months and they're spending a lot. You can judge within a reasonable confidence interval that this is a bad apple. Whatever they're trying to achieve, you can say very few people looking to achieve these outcomes have that level of funding and started off that quickly without being bad actors. Getting some stats out. We saw how effective it was. 2016 US presidential election, the St. Petersburg-based Internet Research Agency had 1,000 staff members producing this stuff. This is where we talk about a lot of the bot accounts, the AstroTurfed accounts coming out to influence the election. $25 million budget. And what are the...
To conduct
influence operations during the 2016 presidential election.
Primarily social media.
Using almost exclusively, yeah. Well, in the IRA case, yes. The thing that I found very interesting, which does have applications for business, is that Facebook was a platform by which the IRA targeted, no, probably shouldn't say IRA, the Internet Research Agency targeted conservatives, and Instagram was a platform by which they targeted progressives. In this alone, you see that age and demographics dictate what channels you are using, right? They didn't bother making Facebook a progressive platform or vice versa because they knew, looking at the demographics of who uses what platform, we're most likely to get a positive outcome if we tailor our messaging to platforms. As a business, exact same rules apply. There are going to be, if you're going to be advertising your Ford F-150, you're probably not going to do it on TikTok to a 21-year-old, right? Oh, emission standards. Oh, I can't park it in Newtown. All of that, you know? If you're, what would you be advertising on TikTok? The flip side also
have you got TikTok on your phone?
I do not have TikTok on my phone. I had it at one point, and when the Australian government said to go out and delete it, next second, off my phone. That was a few phones ago, so hopefully it's... But anyway, your channels have to represent the people that you're targeting. And that's what the Russians identified very well when they were running IOs against the Americans. That's what marketers and advertisers have long understood. And that's what business leaders have understood. Another example of where the TTPs, the tactics, the methods used by advertisers and people running IOs are the exact same.
So... newish concept, it's been around for ages, inverted commas, winning the hearts and minds of people.
Yeah, for marketing terms, segmentation.
It's the same
It's the same
deal.
thing. Yeah, it's just audience segmentation, market segmentation. We've long known it. You know, if you're going to watch a war movie, yeah, you'd probably have your Ford F-150 ads. If you're going to be watching a woke movie, are we allowed to say that? A woke movie, that you have your solar, you know, all of that.
So getting outside of maybe some of the technical offensive capabilities of modern militaries using cybersecurity, like back in the day when you're the sort of head of information warfare, were you just like the chief advertising officer for Australia? Is it interchangeable? Because or is that just one of many different...
I can promise you, Phil, that was not my mindset at the time.
But now looking back in hindsight, how much of these applications...
Well, remembering my job was to raise, train, sustain the capability, and not actually apply it. Right?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that'd go off to the operators for that sort of stuff. But I mean, I was.
By the way, you're dressing like an ad executive these days, mate.
Oh, mate.
The T-shirt blazer combo is very ad exec.
Yeah.
It is very ad exec.
Oh, goodness me. Thanks for having me, fellas. I was... back to your question, Phil, now that you've distracted me. I was surprised, maybe not surprised, but I was just struck by the similarities every time I engaged with an advertising company, and there were some big advertising companies that have capabilities that actually play in this space, and the capabilities they bring, how they measure the effects, just blew me away. Relatively simple in thought, but complex and well thought out in execution.
And again, because of it's the immediacy of measuring the effectiveness of an influence operation today is probably the one thing which is seismically different to how it used to be.
And this is the thing, and a lot of these activities need to be delegated down to lower levels. I mean, you don't want to be in a position where you're spending 3 days getting ministerial approval to publish a tweet.
Yeah.
Or respond to journos.
Or respond.
I mean, that's something that we have.
Yeah.
Well, as you both know, but not necessarily all of our listeners, I'm Jewel Haddad. I'm also the editor of Cyber Daily's sister publication, Defence Connect. And, we do see it all the time where the defence force or defence capability more often than not is getting a really bad rap in the media, and we contact them saying, well, what do you have to say about it? And it would take days to get a no comment back.
Yeah.
But in that sense, the ADF or the Department of Defence is forfeiting the narrative. They're actually letting the narrative go.
Yeah, I mean, look, and I'm not here to defend, the Department of Defence, but I mean, I will also, perhaps to present
some balance,
a slightly counter view. Is I mean, I've had when I've been in operational theatres, had journos embedded, or really close, really handy, and that always has some disadvantages and stresses approach to it. But every time I experienced it, the journos involved were brilliant. They were incredibly respectful of the circumstance. You could actually have an honest face-to-face conversation with them and say, hey, this is the sort of stuff that we wouldn't want being published, but it'd be really good if this one was.
And that's trust, right? And this is the nature of the operational environment, is that your courage to conduct influence operations, whether it's business or military, needs to be a relationship of trust, and trust is something that's earned over time and through actions. And to think back to was a good example, Gallipoli, when they got rid of all the journos from Gallipoli and said, you guys are on this island over there, you go and sit there, we can't trust you. Hamilton hated Ashmead Bartlett, he quite liked Beam, but B got thrown in the same thing because all journos were painted the same brush. It's exactly the same scenario.
And each time I was involved in those sort of activities, Phil, I mean, there's planning went into it. I knew exactly what the messages were that we wanted to convey. I knew exactly the information that we wanted to protect and not have published. Not because we didn't want it shared with the Australian people, but it's not just Australian people who read Australian newspapers, right? There was stuff that we just could not afford to have in the hands of our adversary.
Yeah.
And so that sort of stuff must be protected. And so to relate back to this conversation about the application into commercial, there'll be stuff here that commercial in confidence that you do not want your competitors knowing about. But by the same token, there'll be key messages that you desperately want to get. In fact, I shouldn't just say competitors. There'll be information that you don't want your customers and your market to know about. I mean, we saw the recent Senate inquiry with all the hoopla about, was it the then CEO of Woolworths?
Yeah, correct.
They didn't want some, clearly had in his mind, there was a particular, was it return on equity or something, I forget off the top of my head, that clearly did not want, or
they didn't want people finding out the profit.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that's a thing. But by the same token, there's messages you definitely want to be getting out.
So at the end of the day, it's a people game, right? And all the same tenets of what makes effective relationships.
It's about influencing people.
Absolutely, because if you look at the sense of that trying to control the narrative coming out of Gallipoli, which took days for the wire to get it back, and I think the first reports in Australia weren't from BNL, from other journos, because of censorship and all this sort of stuff, right? It's mechanically sort of put in place. The same applies in business today. For you to get the best outcome in terms of influence operations using the media for commercial gain, you need to trust your journalists. But journalists inherently, if you look at the ethics index, I think real estate agents are right at the bottom.
I thought it was journalists.
Journalists are just above them. Most people don't trust journalists. But the better relationship is for business, the better relationship you can cultivate with the media and a relationship of trust. Sometimes you need to give stuff away on the basis that information won't come into public domain, or it's on in confidence, or it's on background, I guess is the term you want to use. They're the relationships you get best thing. But you got to manage people. Manage people and personalities is critical to influence operations.
Yeah, dead
there
right.
You go. Anyway, that's nice to muse about this. There's something.
As you both know, I could talk about this stuff underwater with a mouthful of marbles. It would be good to come back to this at some stage.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a lot of relevant, because it it's to your point, there's the planning and the strategy around it, but then there's the operational delivery of it, the strategy and the tactics to deliver it. It's like most things, it's got to be planned and connected.
And then might tap into my network and see if we can bring someone on.
I'd like that. That would be good.
Help us out next time.
Yeah, but how do you normalise this concept of influence operations happens inside a business? Not many people talk about it, but it's pretty much the nature of the game.
I do want to end on one reflection that I have for all of our marketing and comms people that might be listening from a range of companies that do often listen to our podcasts, and it's on the concept of verisimilitude, which throughout my career in marketing, advertising, journalism, I've always used the concept of verisimilitude. So
you'll have to tell me what that means. Mate.
It means the truth likeness of a statement. So if a statement is perceived to be true, then people believe it's true. So think of a politician that you both like. Don't say who they are, but think of someone instinctively that you just trust. And if they came out and said a very absurd fact, you'd be likely to agree with them because you've often trusted this person, you've often believed in them. Now think of a politician you both dislike who comes out with a statement of reality and a very mainstream fact, and you're probably going to be sitting there listening to them like, nah, that can't be right. That is because...
Clearly a deep fake.
Well, yeah, they wouldn't be speaking sense. It's the notion that a statement can be deemed as true or untrue by the package that it comes in. So that's why when you're creating a brand, you would always spend a lot of time on things like font. You spend a lot of time on color because different demographics err to different fonts, different demographics err to different colors, you sway in different ways with these things. So when you're creating a branding package to get that verisimilitude across, to get that truth likeness across, you would spend hours and hours and hours thinking about these things to create the package around a truth statement such that your target audience deems it factual. There is no concept I can think more of that applies both to information warfare and to marketing and business comms than the concept of verisimilitude. We saw it with the Russians that the research was very clear that different ideologies, different political ideologies would have different preferences for fonts. So conservatives would like serif fonts, progressives would like sans serif fonts. In the US, obviously, Republicans would err to red. When you take all these factors together, you would build an astroturfed brand, which someone would look at and because their inclinations would instinctively agree. And that's why so many crazy things were coming out during the 2016 presidential election, like the Pope endorses Trump or this or that. Just a lot of statements that were just not grounded in reality, but people just hook, line, and sinker believed them. And it's the same thing when your business is executing a brand campaign for whatever it is, going back selling lamb or selling Ford F-150s or anything, you need to package it up, and everything from font, color, the channel that you sell it on, all sums to selling to your market segment, whether it is true or not in their belief.
That's why it's a specialist function.
Yeah. And that's exactly why it's a specialist function.
Yeah. And that takes years and years and years of training and capability building to get that right. So what's this got to do with cyber? Well, most of it happens through cyber these days.
The carriage of
these days.
Yeah. And I mean, spoofing, phishing. Phishing's a great example of you're actually using these things. So if I got an email from my boss, Phil Tarrant, and he's really polite to me in an email, I'd know it's a lie. I'm joking. Please keep me on. I'm joking.
The word verisimilitude. Yeah.
Well, this is most influence operations. The effectiveness is to do with context.
Yeah.
And again, this comes down to the people and the connectivity of it. And it's going to be hard for machines to work that out
to copy it. Yeah. And, if I got an email from someone pretending to be Phil Tarrant and the font is
spelling mistakes in it,
and there's spelling mistakes and it's red, I'd be like, this is probably not real.
No.
But if it spoofed your language, then I could fall for it, right? This is exactly where it falls into cyber, spoofing, phishing. All of this is the exact same concept.
I think we're onto something with this, gents. I like it. I like it. Let's do more of it. Good to see you in the studio, Marcus.
Fabulous to be here.
Much better. It's much better in the studio. I think.
Yeah, it's good to see you. I mean, it helps. It helps the conversation.
It does. And Liam, thanks for coming on, mate. Keep you and your team keeping us informed about what's going on.
Yeah,
Less
several-
hack stories, more, hey,
Yeah,
this
well,
sort of stories.
If anyone does have any feedback on or what they would like to hear about in Australia's digital transformation, right the way through from products, services that are helping your businesses grow to us breaking hacks, let us know, liam.garman@momentummedia.com.au, and I'm always happy to have a chat.
There you go. Thank you. It's Marcus Thompson, Liam Garman. This is Cyber Uncut. Hope you enjoyed that. There's lots of other episodes. Go and tune into them. Any feedback at all? Well, what would be really handy, we don't ask a lot for this, but keep those reviews coming, please. If you like what we're doing and this is interesting, the more reviews we get, the more people find us, listen to us, and hopefully we can help people become more informed. So that'd be great if you could do that for us, and a small favour for me. Remember, cyberdaily.au is the website you need to go to. We'll see you next time. Until then, bye-bye.